Hey everybody, it's Besta, which is Tim Hinton. I'm here with my favorite cousin, Kelly. How are you, Kelly?
I'm great, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing great. I was thinking today, you're not only my favorite cousin, you're actually a really good friend of mine, and I love that we get to spend time like this together. So thanks for coming to talk with me
Oh,
today.
well, that makes my heart warm.
Oh, well, it's true. I mean, really, you're a very good friend, and I love communicating with you, and you're great about keeping up with us here in Lisbon and asking all kinds of questions. And you, I think, as I mentioned before, on the last we talked before about you as a skate mom, which I thought was a really interesting conversation. Today, we're going to talk about you as a special ed educator,
Yeah,
special needs educator. How would anyway? So you had this whole interesting career as an educator for a long time. How
yep.
did you end up in the whole special needs part?
So I was a just gen ed teacher for years. I did first grade, I did second and third grade remediation. I did and then I fell into kindergarten. And the time that I started teaching kindergarten was a point in time when school divisions were really pushing inclusion, which putting students with special needs into a regular class instead of into self-contained classes. And so I started having lots of students in my class. Well, not lots, but every year I had a couple or three that had special needs. And I had the support of the special ed teacher, but I loved working with them. I loved all of my students, but I just really found that working with those special needs students fulfilled something in me. And so there came a point when both of my kids were in college when I decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to school too. And I got my master's in special ed,
Cool.
and which I never really thought about getting a master's, but I really want to. So I got my master's in early childhood special education and adapted curriculum. That adapted curriculum was preschool through 12th grade. So although I did not want to teach 12th grade.
Right. Well, you're great with the obviously you had the thing for the younger kids, and you
Yes,
taught younger kids. So did you go back to school with that very specific thing in mind, like, hey, I think I want to work with these specific types of kids?
I did. And so I got that degree. And then at the same time, as our kids were out of the house and we didn't feel like we needed to be stuck anywhere anymore, I wanted to move to Northern Virginia. That for a very selfish reason. My retirement is based on the highest 3 years of my salary, and my salary in Northern Virginia was going to be a lot more than down in the Williamsburg area. So, so I applied. Special ed teachers are always in demand. So although I didn't get early childhood right away, I was a K3 special ed teacher. So I had students, and they would come to my room for part of the day, and I would go to their rooms with them for part of the day. So I did that for a couple of years, and then the early childhood position opened up in what Fairfax County calls preschool autism class, which is a class for the students with the most significant language disabilities. Whether it's autism, a lot of times preschoolers aren't identified as having autism yet. They just have a developmental delay. But most of my kids were partly verbal, nonverbal. A few of them were very verbal, which leads to some funny stories.
Well, yeah, and believe me, everybody, we have lots of. I got to tell you, Kelly, like it was a constant source of entertainment and fun for me that you would share with me. Oh, you won't believe what the student said to me today, or somebody bit me again, or whatever. I was constantly found this fascinating. Mostly because I just think it's superhuman of you that you can do this. Like I could not do this work. And the fact that you were so good at it and you loved it so much and you helped so many students, I think it's quite remarkable. So you're talking about students who are not even in first grade yet, and they show up and they need special help. Like you said, some of them are nonverbal.
Yeah, I had quite a few nonverbal kids, and I should call them students, but kids. So my program specifically focused on kids that were as young as 2 years old to up to 5 before kindergarten. Once they were kindergarten age, they were no longer eligible for my program. So.
Okay, I have so many questions, and we've talked about this a good bit before, but so if they are that young, it strikes me that it would be really like if they're all right, how do I ask this correctly? If they have special needs, if there's some developmental delay, does that not make it harder simply to have them in the room with you?
It can, it's, and of course, being that they're so little, a lot of times they didn't want to be away from home. They wanted to be with mom or dad or, or grandma, whoever was their regular caregiver. So we had kind of all of the issues of preschoolers separating from parents, coupled with their individual needs. And each child was working on their individual program. Um, I'm sure you've heard of an IEP, an individualized education plan. So they all had their individual programs. But we did stuff, we would do circle time and we would do arts and crafts, and we just modified it because they obviously needed more help than a typically developing preschooler might.
So give me an idea what your classroom was like. Like how many students would you typically have at
So
one
the
time?
most I would have was 8. And for every 2 students in my class, I would have an adult. So there was myself, and then there were teaching assistants that also were in my class. So typically we ran around 6 students and 3 adults. But as soon as 7 walked through the door, we would get another adult. So I had plenty of help. And
Right, but you had reason for that kind of,
right.
the students needed that kind of special attention and help
Yes.
all the time. And you were in charge of these assistant teachers or helpers. What did you call them?
Assistant teachers is
Right,
what I
so
would
you had
call
to
them.
you were sort of leading the charge for here's what these students need to do and here's how
Yes.
to manage this one. It must have been a lot of planning.
It was, and we had the way our program was set up. We had a couple afternoons a week where the kids weren't there. They were there 3 days all day, and then 2 days only half day. And so on those half days, obviously we would be planning and prepping and doing all of those things, but we'd also be talking. And their feedback was invaluable to me because they'd say, "Oh, I've noticed that Tim does this every time I ask him to do that." And so we could come up with a strategy to kind of help decrease some of those behaviors. But because they observed a lot more than I did.
Well, it's
So, and
impossible. Go ahead.
it also allowed us, when the kids were there, we had it set up so we were working with 1 or 2 at a time, not the whole, like we had whole group parts, but then we also had parts where I would have one sitting on this side of me and one on this side of me. And I would be doing specific activities kind of back and forth between the 2 of them. So
It's incredible to me that it sounds like it would require such a level of focus and attention and patience.
which is funny because I would not say that focus and attention are strong suits of mine. I've always joked that there's a reason I did so well with preschoolers with special needs, because I'm kind of at the same level in a lot of ways.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true, but the idea that you could sort of, you had an idea of somehow associating with their need to like being a little bit scattered or having attention issues. I'm not saying that
Yes.
you did, but you seem to understand that part.
Yeah, I feel like I did. And I think one thing that helped me, because I came from a background of general ed with a classroom of 25 kids, I had a better ability to like monitor a whole classroom than some of my colleagues who had always been special needs teachers and didn't have that experience being in charge of 25 by themselves. So
Makes
that was
perfect sense.
helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that makes perfect sense to me. Okay, so I like I said, I always marveled that you would share these stories with me. Like, give me an example of something that would happen in your classroom that nobody would ever expect to happen in any kind of classroom.
I'm going to say, well, I guess people expect biting, but I mean, every year I had a biter, and you try to avoid getting bit, but they're pretty good. I used to take pictures of the bites and send them to my late husband, and he would always get really upset. I'm like, no, it's fine. They
Well, like,
typically
it's just
break the skin.
this still, but you would have marks on your arm because I saw some of these pictures. So, like, what? I know we can't really talk about these specific issues of the children, but like, what is it that makes a kid a biter when they're in that kind of developmental stage?
So I looked at and was taught to look at behavior as communication. So it depended on the child. I had one child that it was pure and total attention seeking. And literally, our coach, our program had coaches that would come in and help you out, was in my classroom one day talking to me, and he and I were having a conversation like this way. I had a little friend to my left, and all of a sudden, while I was talking to the coach on my right, I realized that little friend was clamping down on my arm because I wasn't paying attention to him. And I mean, neither of us had noticed he was getting ready to do that. But, we kind of determined his was attention seeking. Sometimes it was work avoidance, like, I don't want to do what you're asking me to do, so I'm going to bite you. Or, just typical frustration, like, this is hard and I don't like it.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. And that you were so patient and kind to these special kids. So, did you never worry about like getting really hurt?
No, I had colleagues that got really hurt, but they were so little. My kiddos were so little that I didn't worry about serious injuries. My colleagues with older kids, a couple of them had pretty significant injuries that had to be dealt with.
But you weren't worried about being
I would
bit.
always run. Yeah. Yeah. If they broke the skin, I would fill out an incident report just in case something happened down the road. But never did.
Yeah.
So
good. So give me another example of a behavior that you had to deal with and how you managed it.
So another thing that was quite prevalent in my classroom was kids eloping or trying to leave the room or leaving the room. And, you're kind of aware of who is going to do that. And you try to stop it before they get out the door. That's actually how I got probably the worst injury I ever had teaching, because I stuck my arm out to stop a child from running out the door, and he clotheslined on it and pulled it back and messed up my shoulder. So, yeah, that one, I definitely filled out an incident report for that one. But one time, this is one of my funny stories. Tim Kaine was in our building, and he was going to visit another preschool class, not mine. And we were just going along, and all of a sudden I noticed that one of my little friends was at the door. And in my mind, I thought, he can't open that door. Guess who could open that door? So and this kid is tiny, like maybe up to my thighs height, little guy. And of course he does open the door, which was heavy. And I still am thinking he can't get out the door. Out the door he goes and barrels right into Tim Kaine. And of course, because Tim Kaine is there, the principal's there, multiple dignitaries, yeah, it was quite the moment. And of course I went running out after him like a maniac.
So what happened? How did Tim Kaine react?
He thought it was funny. And I think he was like, something to the effect of, I get an idea of what you guys are dealing with, and it was good. But anyway, that's how I met Tim Kaine.
Well, not everybody can say that. And, he's not wrong. Like this is like a day in the life, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, behavior is communication, but you never know. I had a kiddo once that when he'd get angry, he'd take all his clothes off. And, there you are. And I'm like, I'm not coming near you. Like, So,
wait,
so
because you felt like it was unsafe, or
just kind of
a boundary.
The boundary of it, yeah.
So what happens then? So there's a kid standing there without any clothes on. What happens next?
So you'd find something that they like or that they want, and you're like, as soon as you have your clothes on, you can have the iPad for 5 minutes. So you have to bribe them. I know the word, they probably don't look kind with the word bribe, but I mean, that's essentially what you're doing.
Well, you're trying to get them back under control. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So you got to do anything you can. That seems very clever, actually.
Yeah. I mean, and usually it would work. Sometimes it wouldn't. And this particular little guy quite often wouldn't get to go outside with everybody else because he'd be sitting naked on the floor. And I'd be like, you can't go outside till you have clothes on. And so I'd just sit there in a chair. He would throw shoes at me. And so you try to ignore a lot too. Like that would, you know.
Well, I was going to ask, so that's one of the strategies too, is just to pretend it's not happening?
Yeah, just not to give it any attention, because I mean, that was a hard one with the teaching assistants a lot of times, because I'd be like, just don't pay attention when they're doing XYZ. And it's hard. It's hard when somebody's biting you not to pay attention to them. You know, and I had one assistant who would scream when she'd get bit, which I completely understand. It hurts, but I'd be like, you're reinforcing that behavior. He's going to keep doing it because he gets a reaction out of you that he likes. So
what's interesting is you're sort of discussing, like, I don't know a lot about kids. Like, I don't have kids. I've been around a lot of kids, but I have this impression that kids do this kind of stuff, and it's a lot, and parents have to navigate this. But the idea of navigating it with a bunch of special kids, and these are not your normal, not normal kids, but like they're kids with special needs, right?
Right.
So it's like it's all amped up, and I think it's so impressive to me that you like just kept your cool.
Right, and I mean, it was hard, but you know, it helped me a lot that I felt like we had a good sense of humor as a staff in my room. So once the situation was over, whatever it was, we would all have a good laugh and go on about our business. And, you know.
Well, Kelly, I feel like that's one of your superpowers, honestly, just for you as a person. It's like you have this great sense of humor, and you're able to find the humor, whether it be dark humor, in like any kind of thing. And this gets you through a lot. And I think that this is something that you really pulled on here.
I think I did too. Because if you don't laugh about it, it's going to upset you and make you miserable. And who wants that? Like,
well, I think that's why you and I would have such a good laugh. Like, you would send me a note, you won't believe what this kid did today. And it was hilarious in retrospect. I'm sure maybe in the middle of it.
I know.
You got to tell me some more behaviors. I got to hear some more stories.
So I had one time take literally, this was right after we went back face to face after COVID. So we had kind of little pods all over the room because they couldn't play together. They had to play in separate areas. So we had kind of set up bookshelves and stuff to make little play areas all around the room. He took all the toys in the area that he was in, and he basically barricaded himself into the play area. And of course, we could climb the shelves and get in if we needed to, but I laughed pretty hard. My staff didn't get it, but I was like, I want to get him a giant red flag and he can wave it from the top of the barrier.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that was, and lots of dumping of, even when I was doing E3, I had some kids that could trash a room so fast. Like, in fact, I think I had a picture of it come up in my memory, so I'll send it to you later. Like, they would just dump all the containers out onto the floor and all the crayon bins out, and you know, they would just dump stuff, and you know, you're trying to do that ignoring while they're doing the behavior. But
I don't understand how you handle this. Like, how do you ignore that? And then what? Later, I've just got to clean stuff all up.
So yeah, I definitely people would help with cleanup, and if the child was able to calm themselves down enough and kind of get back to baseline level for them, I would have them help me. You know, come over here, let's pick up these blocks. Let's put these away. It was great trying to figure out which puzzle pieces went in which puzzle box. That was always a fun game.
Gosh. You're talking about puzzles getting mixed up? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Wait till you see this picture. But yeah, that was one. And again, you have to laugh at it because it did. When I was doing K3, I had everything on rolling shelves so that if a child started doing that, we could start rolling shelves out into the halls before they got to them to dump stuff out of them to try to save some stuff. And
so you have a kid that's throwing stuff everywhere. How do you stop? How do you deal with that? I have no idea what I would do. You're trying to ignore it, but it's still trashing the room. Like, how would you deal with that kid? What would you say to them?
So it's the best way I can think to describe it. When you are like at your wit's end and you're frustrated, you know how you kind of can't hear people anymore and you can't or when your Wi-Fi keeps buffering while you're trying to talk to somebody.
You're having a little bit of that today.
But yeah, you get to the point where you're so frustrated or emotional that you can't listen to people and calm down. So you kind of have to wait till they kind of come back down a step or two. And then I always tried to be very gentle and kind because you certainly don't want them to escalate again, which they can do. I had one particular teaching assistant that was excellent at escalating children. I don't think she realized it, but yeah, she would get them going. And, I mean, it's hard. And it certainly wasn't just happening in mine. This happens in classrooms all over the country all the time. So if you're in a general ed classroom and a child does this, typically they take every other student out of the classroom and leave somebody watching the student who's having a tantrum is what it is.
A bit of a meltdown.
Yeah. And they just have to de-escalate themselves, and then you can kind of talk through it. Obviously, with older kids, I had things in place, like I had a bulletin board that had different feelings and different colors, and they could say, I'm in the green, I feel good and happy and I'm great. Or they could be like, I'm in the red and I'm getting angry. And that if they were able to express that, you could say, okay, come on, let's take a break. Let's figure out what do you need to calm down. And so we'd have lots of things like buckets of squeezy toys and poppets and things like that they use to help themselves calm down. So.
Oh, I'm always a fan of puppets. So that sounds like
Yeah.
Maybe I should keep some puppets around here for me. I'm a big fan of puppets. You would often share with me that you would say to them, we don't do blah, blah, blah in kindergarten. Like, was this not a standard line?
It was. I mean, I was astounded at the things. I had kindergartners bite the brick wall one time. We were outside for something. And I looked over, they're biting the bricks. And I'm like, what are you doing? I wanted to go, what the hell are you doing? But did not say that.
So you would say, we don't
bite the bricks. Kindergartners don't bite bricks. They would lick the bottom of their neighbor's shoe. They would, I don't remember doing stuff like that. Maybe I did, and maybe we all block it out as we get older, but I don't remember being so sensory, like needing sensory input all the time.
Which is one of the special needs you're dealing with, I suppose. Yeah. So you would just say to them, well, we don't do blah, blah, blah in kindergarten, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Although with my preschoolers, I handled it a little bit differently. We would typically tell them what we wanted them to do. So you try to think of the positive way to phrase it. Keep your mouth off your neighbor's shoe. It's hard sometimes, because your first instinct is to say, stop licking his shoe. That's gross.
No, you really do have to train yourself to sort of react with the correct way. And I think that sounds really hard.
It could be. And
it requires training, and you had the training and you had the skills, but I still think it's quite amazing.
Right. Well, sometimes I would pause. Sometimes I would be like, okay, before you say anything, take a breath, think about what it is that you need to say. And I think that was probably my special ed masters that I got. That was probably the best training that I got from that, was that you don't have to kind of keep an ongoing conversation going. You just take a minute, take a breath, and be like, what is the behavior I want this child to be doing right now? Because if I say to you, stop touching your neighbor's shoe, all you hear is touch neighbor's shoe. Like, or if I say to you, don't think of blue, think of red, you're thinking of blue because that's what I said first. So,
Interesting.
or maybe red because I said it last. Some kids do the last thing.
Wow, there's so much to think about. You know, it's funny because I had somebody one time explain to me that like they finally figured out as an adult, as a regular adult person, that sometimes what they really needed to do was just be quiet. Just don't say anything. And I actually do think that's really good advice in a lot of situations. You know, you just don't have to say anything sometimes. It's better just to keep your mouth shut.
I agree with that 100%. Not as good at that. Like, I have a hard time not saying what I'm thinking.
Well, that can be tricky, but I think I have found sometimes that I'm better off if I just don't say anything. So, all right. And you would have like things happen that you would share with me that I could never imagine having happen in a classroom. Any more stories that you can share around that kind of thing?
I mean, like, I'm just trying to think now. I'm of course drawing a blank because
I'm putting you on the spot for it.
Well, I know, but it seemed like stuff happened all the time. And well, this is less the kids, but when we figured out the child that wanted attention and was biting, he started attacking one of my teacher assistants in particular. And so for a while, she just didn't work with him. Like, it was a bad enough problem that we just kept them apart. But then we decided to start having her work with him again. And I told her, I'm like, if he starts to bite you, I don't want you to say anything to him. I want you to say banana and we'll come help you. Like, one of us will intervene with him so he isn't getting your attention. So literally 4 hours later, the child starts biting at her and she's going, banana, banana, banana. And none of us are doing anything because we've all forgotten that banana is the code word. And finally she said, help me, banana.
That's hilarious.
Like, oh my God. And so I jumped up and helped, but I was like, I felt so bad.
Well, in your defense, that's really tricky, but that's a really smart strategy. Like, all these things you're discussing are just like clever. And I feel like you were almost like Sherlock Holmes in it all the time. Well, how can we, how are we going to get around, or who's MacGyver in it? You know what I mean? Like, okay, we got to come up with a solution for this new strange behavior thing we never expected. What are we going to do? Like, it sounds kind of fun.
Right. It really was. I found it really fulfilling. And that, like, you're looking at a particular child, a particular behavior, and trying to figure out, okay, we don't like this behavior, but you can't just take a behavior away. You got to give them some other behavior. So, sometimes for the kids that bite, you give them objects they can bite, like teething tubes and like baby teething rings and stuff, because they need to bite. So here, you can bite this all you want. So, you do that, and you're just putting the pieces together, figuring out, okay, what triggers the behavior? How can I stop that trigger, first of all? If I know you are always going to react the same way to the same stimuli, I'm going to stop doing that if I can. But that doesn't mean, if you don't like the hello song, I still have to sing the hello song. So, we have to find something else that.
But that's what I'm talking about. Like, you're like sleuthing it out. Like, okay, this keeps happening. What is it that's triggering it? Oh, and then once you figure that out, then what are we going to do? What's the behavior we're going to, like, it sounds like an interesting puzzles, although I think the volume of puzzles might be overwhelming.
Well, I would say there was definitely something every day would happen that we went to MacGyver, but it wasn't constant. Lots of our day was just kind of even tone. We're all doing what we're supposed to do. One of the things about the kids that I worked with is you had to kind of, like, you didn't have to do the scheduled exact minute wise, but you had to do it in the same order. So, like, picture day made them insane because picture.
Because they were out of their routines.
Yeah,
their
they were
routines
out
were
of their
very
routine.
important.
They were having something done with a stranger that, you know, I mean, think about any typically developing 2-year-old. They don't really like to have somebody taking their picture that they've never met before. So, you know, that, or assemblies, or, you know, anything out of the ordinary would set it off. And I mean, you know, from being in school, there's always something out of the ordinary going on.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, like, even in a regular classroom, anything out of the ordinary can really sort of create some chaos
Yes.
and huge distractions. So the idea that it would be so magnified for these special needs kids makes perfect sense.
Right. Right. So we just tried to keep our schedule in the same order as much as possible. And then beyond that, you just kind of had to deal with it. Like, we would take backpacks full of toys down picture day so that everybody could be sitting on the floor with their toys. And
yeah.
And we definitely amused some of the other kids because, you know, somebody was always taking off and running away, and, you know, it was chaos.
Yeah, but it sounds like sort of organized chaos, right?
It was organized chaos, yeah. And I think I have a fairly high level of tolerance for chaos, which served me well.
I think I would have a harder time, but you are sort of really flexible and easygoing, Kelly, and like probably I would not do as well. Maybe I could learn to do that. I don't know. So I feel like you made some big differences in some kids' lives and in their parents' and families' lives. Do you have some remembrances of like, wow, this was really a success, or where you knew this made a difference for these people?
So a couple. The year that we were doing virtual learning, it was obviously preschoolers aren't going to go onto the computer by themselves and do what they're supposed to do. So they had to have adults with them during our virtual learning times. And I think that group of parents got great instruction in how to work with their kids without fussing or without it being stressful, to like, because we used applied behavior analysis. It wasn't strictly ABA, but it was based on the principles of ABA. So, if I want you to sort pictures, when you sort all the dogs into one pile and all the cats into another, I'm going to give you a reward. And the parents got to see us working through that. And obviously they had to be giving the reward because I was a computer screen, not a person. So I think that was a big success. I would say that the preschoolers that did that probably made more progress that year than other older kids that were doing it on their own. And then I have another one. I had a student my first year. Well, I guess she was with me my first and second year in the preschool program. And she is going to middle school next year I don't think she's receiving any services anymore at all. She's just regular classes doing her thing, and she's doing a great job. So I call that success.
Absolutely. And it's just like life-changing. And I think that's amazing. And you had to work with the parents, right? Like you just mentioned on those Zoom classes, you were having to teach the parents, but I would assume all the time you're having to tell the parents, well, this is how we're dealing with this behavior, that kind of thing.
Yep. And I would, a lot of times I would start with, how do you deal with it at home? Like, what do you do? And then you could have a conversation. When it came time to write their individualized plan, I would talk to the parents and be like, what are your goals? Like, what is it important? Because I'm going to have to write some goals that are like, Tim will match identical pictures on X out of 10 opportunities, I had to have some of that. But really, if you're a parent with a child that is non-communicative, you want them to communicate with you. You want them to listen to you. You want them to start following some directions. So we kind of, we would kind of incorporate that too. And, I could tell them, oh, this is what I do. This seems to work really well.
Yeah, so. I think as a parent, that would be unbelievably helpful and interesting. And because they're trying to figure out how to
Right.
manage at home, of course.
Right. And I always had so much empathy for them because, I had a few hours a day. They had all the time, they, and, when their children got home from school, I'm sure they were more difficult than what I had been dealing with all day. So,
Well, but also, you were giving those parents a break from that
yeah.
responsibility and teaching and guiding those students and helping them. So it just seems incredibly valuable. I know that you miss that you're not doing this work now, but I know that you look back on it and you must be really proud of the difference that you made in those kids' lives.
Yeah, I think I am. I mean, I think when I first retired, I was just bummed. Like, because as you know, retirement wasn't 100% my choice. It, which is another visit that you and I can have another day. But,
Yeah, some health things that you've been dealing with,
yeah.
and that was part of the issue for you not being able to continue the work.
Right.
I know that was disappointing, but still, maybe now there's at least a little bit of distance where you can look back and see all the good.
I think so. I definitely think so. And I am, thanks to social media, I'm in touch with some of my former parents, less of the special ed parents than my gen ed kindergarten parents, but it's fun because a lot of those kiddos that I taught in kindergarten are in college now. And so it's fun to see what they're doing. And like, I think I sent you a video of one little girl that I had that was pretty special needs in my regular kindergarten class. And she's got the most beautiful singing voice now and performs beautifully.
Wonderful.
So, seeing stuff like that makes me proud, but also just happy that they're having a good life.
Of course. Well, I think it's wonderful the work that you did. I think you were incredibly good at it. I don't think I could have done it. I think you have some sort of superhuman powers that allows you to do that work. And anybody that's doing that work, my hat's off to you. I think it's really important. And like I said, probably not something I could do. Me, I was better with the high school kids than I was with the little kids.
Yeah.
Some people are better with the little kids. Everybody has their thing.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think I could do high school kids. Not even, I mean, the degree I had would have been the kids that were in self-contained classes in high school. So maybe folk like working on a preschool level, but yeah, I still couldn't. There's a whole host of things with bigger kids that it's just harder.
Oh, sure. Well, and of course, teachers are never really appreciated for a multitude of reasons. But as someone who loves educators and appreciates your work, I just want to say thank you for all that hard work and for all those kids you helped. And thanks for sharing all these stories. It's fascinating to me what every day would be a challenge and sort of funny and crazy and all at the same time. It sounds really interesting.
It was very interesting. And like I said, I miss it. I miss the interaction with the people. Don't miss waking up at the crack of dawn. I like sleeping in.
That I appreciate too. Well, Kelly, this was fun. Thanks for talking with me.
Sure, I enjoyed it a lot.